President Joe Biden announces executive actions on the climate crisis. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg is completely baffled and shocked regarding how much energy electric vehicles utilize. We have al-Qaeda making a comeback in Afghanistan. Jerry Nadler says the quiet part out loud about taking away your guns. And we have a trucker protest in California regarding Bill AB 5. All that and more here on The Bald Brad Show. Welcome to The Bald Brad Show. It is Thursday, July 21st, and as always, I couldn't be happier than to share this fine morning with all you fellow American patriots. Heck, we're making our way through the week, and not really just the week, but also the month here at The Bald Brad Show to bring you all the news and information you need to know about. So if you want to support us and join the show, and you're over at YouTube, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. If you're over at Rumble, hit that plus and leave us a nice comment down below. If you're over at any of the podcast airwaves listening in, go ahead and leave us a nice 5-star review. Your help and support would be going towards a conservative and to get conservative thought and ideas out there to new viewers who haven't seen our content or our channel. So your help and support would be greatly appreciated. And look, folks, there's a lot of stuff being pushed out there by the left and the progressive Democrat Party. So we need to get more conservative thought out there to new viewers so that we can increase the base here and get Republicans elected and back in office to fix the disaster that the Biden administration and the Democrats are doing. Which leads me into the lead story of the day regarding disaster. You have the Biden administration announcing executive actions on the climate crisis. And I will go ahead and put the climate crisis in air quotes for those that are listening, because it's truly baffling that what's taking place at the U.S.-Mexico border is still just considered a challenge to the Biden administration when you have over 200,000 illegal immigrants pouring across the border each and every month. That's about 6,000 to 8,000 per day. You have caravans coming from South America of like 15,000 to 20,000 people. They're taking up hotel rooms, which we're paying on taxpayer dollars. Now we're also giving them abortions, according to ICE, that you're going to pay for taxpayer dollars. Joe Biden's flying them under the dark of the night, which you're paying for with your taxpayer dollars. So all this stuff's just money out the window. And now he wants to spend billions of dollars more on this climate crisis. It's just unbelievable. The language the Democrats are willing to call a crisis, and at the other end, something else is just a challenge. So President Biden announced Wednesday that he will be implementing a number of executive actions focusing on combating climate change. Now, I find this also interesting because I'm reading Glenn Beck's book called The Great Reset. And one of the mechanisms to implement the Great Reset is climate change and making it a crisis rather than a challenge. The book is freaking blowing my mind. If you haven't read it, go pick it up at Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, anywhere. It's going to change you a little bit. Well, Biden's executive actions come after Senator Joe Manchin reportedly said that he will not support a package before the midterm elections, which includes any provisions on energy and climate, with his spokesperson telling Fox News Digital that Manchin wants to avoid taking steps that add fuel to the inflation fire. See, it's amazing that there's basically one or two Democrats, you have Manchin and Kristen Sinema, that somewhat have their mind still towards the middle, the moderate Democrat Party, because everybody else has just gone further left. And you have Bernie Sanders the other day coming out and saying Joe Manchin is speaking a bunch of nonsense and that he's freaking sabotaging the president's agenda. So because Joe Biden is not getting his way, he's going to use executive actions very similar to what Trump did with the U.S.-Mexico border here with climate. I don't agree with it. I don't like it. Look, I'm not a big fan of presidents using executive orders or executive actions. I do think it's overdone. It's overused. And I think it's honestly, in some way, shape, or form, a little bit of an overstretch of power from the executive branch. Included in the executive actions is an effort to protect communities from the extreme heat and dangerous climate impacts, which includes $2.3 billion in funding for the Federal Emergency Management Agency's Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program. Jeez Louise, what a title, huh? I was like, when is this going to end? Which is intended to help communities increase resilience to heat waves, droughts, wildfires, flood, hurricanes, and other hazards by preparing before disaster strikes, according to the White House. But at the same time, when disaster does strike with any of these, you're not going to have any gas because Joe Biden's sending like 5 million barrels of petroleum reserve to China, which his son has investments in. But we're not going to open up a grand jury with that. We're not going to investigate any of that, which is so frustrating. And I've seen your guys' comments. Again, leave me a comment down below because I do love engaging and reading all your comments. Is that how is it that there's no investigations on Joe Biden or Hunter Biden? Like, what the hell? Like, Donald Trump makes a phone call with Zelensky and it's just like everybody loses their minds. But Joe Biden here is caught on tape with certain aspects. He's sending oil and barrels of oil, millions, to China where his son has investments in, but nobody's going to bat an eye over that in the Democrat Party. It is so unbelievable, the corruption of it. The executive actions by Biden also include an effort to lower cooling costs for communities who are suffering from extreme heat, as the White House is issuing guidance that will assist states, tribes, and territories in their funding for community cooling centers, as well as helping people with their communities get access to cooling equipment. So my thing is that why are we continually pumping out more and more money? We are over $20 trillion in debt, and we're just throwing cash out like it's hotcakes. Where are the Republicans at on this? Thank God you have Manchin at least somewhere with his head out of his ass. You know, he's the only one in the Democrat Party that seems to actually acknowledge that when you keep pumping the economy full of money, it's going to cause increased inflation. But clearly Biden hasn't woken up to the massive issue that's going on here. The Federal Reserve can't handle it by increasing interest rates. They're only doing like a quarter, anywhere from a quarter to 0.75% with inflation continually increasing. So as they're increasing interest rates, you have inflation still increasing at the same time. So clearly you're not increasing it enough. And all at the same time, Biden wants to pump out more money into the economy. As I've said in other shows this week, you also have Gavin Newsom. Wrap this one around your head. Gavin Newsom wants to give out more stimulus checks to help fix the inflation problem. That is literally the definition of inflation, by giving out more money, inflating the economy with that money. They don't get it. It's going to continue to get worse. And we're stuck with this, folks, for at least another year and a half. Okay. At least another year and a half. Additionally, the Biden administration will consider potential wind power projects. I'm sorry. It's so baffling to me, this whole wind and solar thing they're trying to push. And again, this comes from Glenn Beck's book. I mean, again, I highly, highly recommend it. I've almost read the whole book in one night. Fabulous, fabulous. Just talking about the climate crisis, their push on wind and solar, and how much damage that's going to do to our natural habitats, our ecosystem, because you're going to have to freaking just barrel through just massive amount of land to be able to put these wind turbines in place, these solar panels that are going to have to use natural resources, but they don't want mining, folks. They don't want mining. They don't understand how you have to build the actual damn thing and put it in place to be able to use it. But you're not going to be able to do that. And these same people that are pushing the climate crisis are the same people of like PETA, right? They don't want animals to be hurt, but they want millions of birds to be completely wiped out by these wind turbines. Furthermore, you also have them want these solar panels that just aren't going to do it. And the cleanest thing of everything, the cleanest thing you could possibly do in terms of, being sufficient energy is putting in nuclear power, but they don't want to do it. They're so scared about this, pushing all this alarmist stuff. If they really cared about the environment, they would put in energy in terms of nuclear power all across the United States to give us that power that we need. But no, they keep pushing this wind turbine crap that has to basically be replaced every 20 or 30 years or something like that, where nuclear power will exceed that and has literally shown in data to exceed those limits in terms of having to be replaced and upgraded and things like that. So in the long run, it would actually cost more money for wind and solar than it would for nuclear power. But they don't want to talk about that. It's just, they don't care. It's all money grab for these people. Biden is also directing the Secretary of Interior to advance clean energy development off the coast of Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina to ensure that these Southeast states will be able to benefit from good paying jobs in the burgeoning offshore wind industry. Just, you try to want to make sense in terms of what the Biden administration's plan is on things. I'm just at this point now where I just call him BS on everything. Like, somebody's benefiting from this. You know what I mean? If it doesn't, there's a saying that we used in accounting when we did auditing. And the saying is, if it smells like shit, usually it is shit. And when you have billions of dollars like this, upwards of $2+ billion being pumped out in the economy for climate crisis, somebody's being pocketed in their book with all this money. And so I'm calling a lot of just smoke. And there's definitely gonna be fire where this is at. It's going in a lot of people's pocketbooks. It's not really gonna make a change here. Look, they've been doing this for decades now without much change. We're still under this whole climate crisis. They're pushing that we're in an ice age back in like the 70s, that things are gonna get cooler. Now they're saying that there's, global warming and the climate change aspect is taking in and all this hubbub and stuff like that. Do I agree that there is some warming and climate is changing? Yes. But their goal and what they want to do in making clean energy isn't the answer. You need to go nuclear. You need to put those plants all across the United States so that we can meet the energy crisis. And that's important. It's vastly important because, bringing them up to my next story here regarding energy and the crisis that we have a massive energy crisis that is taking place because our grids aren't being updated. They're not being able to obtain the amount of energy that Americans are using, which is why we have these rolling blackouts all the time, every single year across the United States, or they're throttling down your energy usage. Many of you in California, specifically Southern California, where I live, see that every single day in the summer, where we're constantly getting throttled by our own government in terms of how much electricity we're using. Mind you, we're paying for it. Okay, if I want to crank that sucker to whatever I want, if I'm paying for it, you better not be throttling it down. But no, they don't want to update the grids. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to spend your taxpayer dollars in the right place. They want to put these freaking wind turbines out in the ocean that aren't going to do jack shit for you, rather than building a freaking nuclear power plant that's going to actually sustain what we need. And like I said, Pete Buttigieg is completely baffled in terms of how much energy is utilized by these electric vehicles and how it's going to cost the American taxpayer more money with these solar and wind turbines in place, and to meet the demand from the electric grid isn't necessarily possible in the time frame that Joe Biden wants to implement all this crap. Without further ado, let's react to this bad boy here.
Secretary Buttigieg, I've been driving an electric car for 10 years, and I've had solar panels for 15 years, and I'm really bullish on technology and the way it could help make our country energy independent, or more energy independent. But I'm really alarmed at sort of the naivete of those who are promoting rapid adoption of these technologies with our existing infrastructure. President Biden signed a non-binding executive order stating that 50% of vehicles sold in the United States should be electric by 2030. Do you support that?
Yes.
Of course he does.
And he also said that by 2035 that 100% of the federal government fleet should be electric. Do you support that?
Yes.
So which uses more electricity? We're talking about residential electricity.
I want to point out, and as always, folks, me pausing it throughout the video. One, I don't want to get hit with a copyright infringement. Furthermore, we're a commentary conservative outlet, so I want to give my commentary on this. Him just going, yes, just shows that he doesn't understand jack crap about any of this. He will claim that he does, and I'm sure he knows a little bit of information, but the amount of understanding and research that goes into this, it is baffling that you would be on board with something like this. But we see this time and time again from the progressive left, the Democrat Party as well, on wanting to push the power of the federal government upon the American citizens, as well as private industry, to force their agenda on everybody else, when not everybody else, one, wants to meet it in that time frame, two, can't meet it in that time frame, and three, the federal government themselves that's pushing it upon everybody can't meet it in that time frame, but they're still going to trot this crap out. Wait till you get all the information, the specifics here.
Electricity here, a refrigerator when it's running, or an electric car when it's charging in your garage?
I would expect a car.
Would you say it uses twice as much or 25 times as much?
I would think closer to 25 times as much. Yeah.
It's actually 50 at the instantaneous moment, but over the course of a year, if I take the numbers from the U.S. Department of Energy about the average household, how many vehicles they own and how far they drive, over the course of a year, an American household would use 25 times as much electricity for their electric car as they would for their refrigerator if they had 100% adoption. And the average family has 2 vehicles, and this would be if the average family had 2 electric vehicles. Do you think it would strain the grid if everybody plugged in 25 refrigerators in every household?
Well, if we didn't make any upgrades to the grid, sure. I mean, if we had yesterday's grid with tomorrow's cars, it's not going to work. It's one of the reasons why we believe that infrastructure includes electrical infrastructure, and argued for that to be included, as it thankfully was in the bipartisan law.
It's just a bunch of pandering to his base. At no point is he going to explain how those upgrades are going to be done. And even if we have those upgrades and looking at the trajectory of them, will they meet the demand that this gentleman here is talking about from the Republican side of the aisle? Are those upgrades actually going to happen by 2030? Are they going to be able to meet the demand that you want to be able to be met? I don't think it's going to happen, and it sure as hell is not going to happen with wind and solar, folks. No way in hell.
Do you think by 2030, which is when Biden says 50% of cars sold should be electric, do you think the grid will be capable of handling electric cars?
It's going to need to be, and we're working with the Department of Energy every day. We've established a joint office of energy and transportation to map out some of the needs. Obviously, some of this gets outside of my lane, and we've been discussing with, for example, the truck stops that are looking at what their power needs would need to be at an interchange where today they're mainly filling up on gas in order to accommodate that. And then, as you mentioned, a lot of the scenario for this is also residential. But it's also worth pointing out that while a typical driver who adopts electric is using more electricity, at the end of the day, they're using less energy because of the efficiency benefits of getting that energy produced at utilities.
The problem is we don't have the capacity to produce that energy. You aptly used the word need. You could say want as well. There's needs and wants to make this fantasy work by 2030. But the reality is the capability is not going to be there.
Exactly right. And I love that frame from this Republican of Kentucky. Just call it a fantasy. And here's the issue also in this conversation, this exchange between a Republican and a Democrat. We see this a lot of times in our conversations with the left, the progressive left, or the Democrat Party, is they have these fantasies, they don't live in reality, and that they want to push this agenda on the American people, whether it's the gender identity agenda, the LGBTQ plus agenda, the abortion agenda, whatever the agenda is, the climate crisis, immigration. I mean, they're constantly pushing this stuff on the American people, this fantasy they want, but they never talk about how you're going to pay for it. And if they are going to talk about implementing it and not talk about how you're going to pay for it, the very implementation they're going to do is not going to meet their fantasy that they're trying to impose upon all of us. So it's just, it's mind-blowing how illogical a lot of these agendas are. And that's why I say I'm starting to get very suspicious with things in terms of where all this money is going. Whose pocket is it going to? Because we've been talking about this for freaking decades, well before I've even been alive. You've had billions and billions of dollars being thrown at this. Nothing has changed, right? You've been talking about that there's going to be an ice age, then there's a global warming, then you change it to climate change. The conversation continues to go and go and go around, spending more taxpayer dollars on this fantasy that they're trying to push. Again, I'm not discrediting the fact that if you want to push this climate change stuff, fine. But if you're going to do it, at least make the argument feasible and not basically a fantasy. I don't even know if fantastical is a word, but you understand what I'm saying is at least can we have the discussion about nuclear power here? And they're not willing to have the discussion because they seen Chernobyl. And people think, oh, well, millions of people died in Chernobyl. No, I mean, at most, you're talking in like a few hundreds at most. The direct cause of it, I think there was like 38 deaths. And then you look at what happened in Japan. And the people that were a direct cause of Japan is minimal. I'm not saying it's great. I'm not saying it's great what happened. But in Japan, an earthquake is what caused that. Here in America, the most tech-savvy nation in the world can implement nuclear power in a safe way, and we've done so. So I just want the Democrat Party to wake up, and those that are watching this to wake up as well in terms of energy. If we want clean, renewable energy, nuclear power is the way to go. Wind and solar isn't. I'm not saying you can't still utilize solar on houses. I'm not saying any of that. We could still utilize it, but them saying that that's going to meet the demands of this 2030 initiative that Joe Biden wants, as well as a 2050 initiative that he wants, is just not feasible. It's asinine.
The average household uses 17% of their electricity for air conditioning. And that would mean the average household uses 1,870 kilowatt hours per year for air conditioning. If that average household plugged in electric cars, do you know how much more electricity they would use in comparison to the air conditioning that air conditions their whole house?
No, but again, I would emphasize it will
Let
be
me help
less
you. Let me help you
overall.
with that first before we go on, because the numbers are important. It would take 4 times as much electricity to charge the average household's cars as the average household uses on air conditioning. Do you think that could be? So if we reach the goal by 2030 that Biden has of 50% adoption instead of 100% adoption, that means the average household would use twice as much electricity charging one of their cars as they would use for all of the air conditioning that they use for the entire year. Do you think this could contribute to rolling blackouts and brownouts in areas of the country where air conditioning is basically considered essential?
Not if we prepare. Look, the fact that people who have electric vehicles are going to use more electricity can't be a reason to give up. The idea that America is inferior to the other countries that have figured this out just doesn't sit well with us in administration, and that's why we're investing in a better grid.
In the time that I have left, let me say, I'm not saying we shouldn't prepare. I told you at the beginning of this, I'm bullish on this technology, but the numbers and the rate of adoption has been developed using political science, not engineering. They're impractical, and if we blindly follow these goals that Biden has set out, it will cause pain and suffering for the middle class. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
So you have this conversation being had, right, between Democrats and Republicans on the climate crisis. There is an agenda where we could meet in the middle, because I don't want my electricity to be throttled. Furthermore, I want electric cars to be utilized. I do think it's good for an environment. Everybody wants to breathe clean air. Everybody wants a better environment. We all live on this planet together. We want that to happen. But how do we get there is where we deviate. Furthermore, when you have this conversation between a Republican and Democrat, one is talking numbers. The other one is talking basically on emotion, right? It's a fantasy. He doesn't want to talk about numbers. He doesn't want to talk the numbers on how to get there and actually be realistic. He just wants to talk about the idea. Remember, when these climate change alarmists are having these conversations, they literally think they're going to die in the next 10 years from climate change. So imagine that. Imagine you put yourself in a different situation where you think you're literally going to die, and you're trying to have a conversation with somebody else that's talking about numbers. Oh, well, realistically, you're going to have about, 99.95% chance of living and all these things. No, you're not getting it. We need to shut down everything. I think you see where I'm going with this, of COVID-19. There's this hysteria on things where people think they're going to die. They think that other people's going to cause them to die. And so they go after it on a pure emotional standpoint and don't actually use reason and logic behind what they're thinking. They just want to espouse a bunch of nonsense. And that's what we're seeing from the Democrat Party here, where the Republican side's looking at the data, understanding what's being done in an emotional aspect, and wanting to solve the issue, but they just want to freak out and be fanatical about everything and not actually resolve it in a realistic manner. So speaking of things of not resolving it in a realistic manner, freaking Joe Biden decided to wake up one morning and pull out of Afghanistan. Yeah, we're back here on that debacle because we can't let this go, folks. And it's not going to be let go because al-Qaeda is surging again nearly a year after Biden's Afghanistan withdrawal. They're back, folks. Just lovely, right? And not only are they back, but they're back with military grade weapons in terms of American weapons, American machinery. We handed them billions of dollars of equipment. We didn't just hand it to them. We actually just gave it to them on a silver platter. There's been videos of them trying to fly our Black Hawk helicopters and utilize our equipment. But you got this idiot in office that is trying to do the right thing. And I put that in air quotes for who's listening because it's never the right thing. It's only the wrong thing with this guy. This guy literally hasn't implemented one good thing. Now, there's going to be those people in the comments who, oh, well, he did this tiny thing. Look at all the big picture things: immigration, the economy, our foreign policy, our domestic policy. Not a good thing. None of it is good. Well, look, he's enacting executive action on climate change, just sending out billions of dollars. That's not going to fix a damn thing. We've seen this time and time again from the Democrat Party as well as Republican Party. These politicians just want to spend your damn money rather than actual resolving issues. It's going in somebody's pocket. We need to find out and do a little paper trail here on where it's all going, because I'm telling you, it's not going to fixing the solution. That's for damn sure. The Islamic extremist group al-Qaeda is surging again, thanks in part to the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan. Who could have thought? Who could have thought this would have happened? I know, shocking. We got lame people like myself, the lay Americans, right? We are patriots. We're American patriots here on the Bald Brad Show. But look, I'm not a PhD. I'm not a politician. I'm not the President of the United States. I'm not the Secretary of Defense. I'm not a military person. I love the military, hence the flag on the hat. Total supporter. You don't have to be a genius to know that this would have happened if you would have pulled out. We've been told by decades by our own military personnel, advisors, if you do this, it's going to happen. Okay. If Trump would have done it, this is what would have happened. I think there was a right way to pull out, and I think there's a wrong way to pull out. This is what happens when you do it the wrong way. On Tuesday, Voice of America reported that al-Qaeda is now better positioned than the Islamic State to spread propaganda and recruit members since President Joe Biden withdrew American troops from the country in 2021. This was according to the United Nations report. The report released on July 15 claims that the high-ranking al-Qaeda officials are bolstered by the Taliban's dominance in a Middle Eastern nation. Quote, al-Qaeda senior leadership enjoyed a more settled period in early 2022. This came again from the UN. You had al-Zawahiri issuing a video message that provided almost current proof of life. Member states, not the al-Zawahiri's apparent increased comfort and ability to communicate, had coincided with the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan and coincided of power of key al-Qaeda allies within their de facto administration. However, the UN also speculates that for now, al-Qaeda does not present a global threat. Look, I'm not a big fan of the UN. I think they're just a committee that sits there and likes to crap and dump on America while they take our money. Furthermore, you had Barack Obama calling ISIS the JV squad, and then ISIS just was running roughshod over the entire Middle East, beheading people, skinning people alive, putting them in freaking jail cells, and then lowering the jail cell into the water and killing them. But, they're not a global threat. They always say stuff like this. And next thing you know, you turn your head around, now they're a global threat again. Quote, al-Qaeda not viewed as posing an immediate international threat from its safe haven in Afghanistan because it lacks an external operational capability and does not currently wish to cause the Taliban international difficulty or embarrassment. Can we just talk about that whole thing? Because the Taliban international difficulty and doesn't want to cause embarrassment? Freaking terrorist organization. Hello? Doesn't want to cause embarrassment? And they don't have all this you don't think that they're capable of sending out cells or already have cells? We've literally caught almost 100 terrorists since Joe Biden's been in office at the U.S.-Mexico border alone. Now we've caught them. Can you imagine how many people are going through that aren't being caught? We have drug smugglers, MS-13 gang members, you have sex traffickers, you have the drug cartel, you have all your terrorists pouring through our border. You're telling me not a few of them might have seeped through because of Joe Biden's border policy, and you're going to tell us that they don't have any external operational capability? I'm sorry, I just don't believe that one bit. Still, though, the group is able to expand its recruiting and communications ability. The international context is favorable to al-Qaeda, which it intends to be recognized again as a leader of global jihad. Quote, al-Qaeda propaganda is now better developed to compete with ISIL as a key actor in inspiring the international threat environment, and it may ultimately become a greater source of direct threat, all thanks to Joe Biden. So let's remember this. When al-Qaeda comes out and attacks one of our allies or attacks the United States, we know where to start in terms of blame. It starts with the Democrat Party. It starts with Joe Biden. It is also noted that the Islamic State has suffered a rapid succession of leadership losses since October 2019, with as an yet unknown impact on its operational health. In August 2021, President Biden withdrew U.S. troops from Afghanistan. After more than 20 years of fighting, with 3 days, the Taliban took over the nation after an Afghan government fell. Again, 3 days. I mean, this is so obvious of what would have happened. And when you get a guy that's trying to appease to somebody, this is what takes place. Biden claimed that intelligence officials did not know that the Taliban would take over as quickly as it did. Honestly, does anybody here at the Ball of Brad show really believe that? Does anybody really believe that? Let me know in the comments. If you're a believer of that statement, Biden claimed that intelligence officials did not know that the Taliban would take over as quickly as it did. Let me know in the comments if you believe that statement, because that to me is BS right there. No way. You're telling me the greatest, most dominant power in all of human history, the best intelligence people on the face of the planet, did not know that this would happen. When we're sitting here at the show in a freaking closet and we're telling you that it could happen without the intelligence, without all that stuff, just going, hey, you guys said this for the last 20 years that something like this would happen. You said it'd be under a week. All these things. It's like, how are we able to do this? And you have the freaking president of the United States and the intelligence committee saying, oh, well, we didn't know. I just don't believe it. Don't believe it one bit. I think they knew and they still did it anyways. One expert at the American Enterprise Institute told VOA News that al-Qaeda's leadership is just as experienced as Osama bin Laden and previous terrorists who directed the 9/11 attacks. See the contradictions that are taking place here? On one end, they're like, they're not posing really an existential threat. They're not really going to come here. They don't want to embarrass themselves and all these things. Oh, and by the way, their leadership is just as experienced as Osama bin Laden. They probably have the capabilities of doing something similar to 9/11. Hey, they're not going to do it. It's so stupid. It's all so stupid. And especially you got a guy that's literally stupid leading this country on all fronts right into the ground. And now you got freaking the guys here, terrorist organization being beholden, while at the same time, Joe Biden's trying to implement back and put back in place the Iran nuclear deal. You guys feel safer? I don't. That's for sure. Now, sources from the National Security Council recently told NBC News that Biden administration's goal is to avoid doing anything stupid before, during, and after the August anniversary. You think that's going to be possible? This is an amazing piece by the Daily Wire. And I'm not hounding Daily Wire. It's just they piecing different news outlets together on what Joe Biden's agenda is, what the UN is saying. They're all idiots. Daily Wire's not just the Biden administration, the UN, just these are leaders that freaking get voted in, like Joe Biden here. As the 1-year mark approaches, officials across the administration have searched and filtered through calendars of all top officials to weed out any events or engagements that could be misconstrued as tone deaf about the botched foreign policy strategy, according to NBC News. So there you have it. Joe Biden just giving al-Qaeda back what we took, and giving them basically billions of dollars in military grade equipment. Just lovely. Well, in other news, Jerry Nadler said the quiet part out loud. Top Democrat makes huge admission about assault weapons ban. Now, there have been a few instances where you had people like The View. You had other prominent Democrats coming out and saying the quiet part out loud as well regarding wanting to take your weapons. But this video clip, it doesn't get any more clear. And he doesn't get any more clear himself in his statement about what the bill does. So you have a House Judiciary Committee chairman, Representative Jerry Nadler. And just, again, Jerry Nadler's a Democrat from New York, so you can tell how far left he was or is. I mean, if you heard somebody from California, you would probably expect, okay, that guy's he's not a moderate Democrat, right? Just far progressive left. Well, he admitted Wednesday the purpose of a renewed congressional effort to pass a federal assault weapons ban is to outlaw rifles that are, quote, in common use. I mean, yeah, they're talking about the AR-15 because that's in common use as well, but there's a lot of rifles. There's a lot of rifles that are in common use that are basically just be expunged. They're out. They don't exist anymore. Though his administration may seem obvious, a committee Republican quickly pointed out that Nadler's statement shows how the bill flagrantly violates Supreme Court precedent on the Second Amendment. They don't care. These are the same people that think that you had a right to an abortion that was created by the Supreme Court years back. Yes, the Supreme Court created rights that don't exist. And first of all, it's not even their job to create rights. It's the legislative branch. But, Democrats don't care. Just as long as they get their way and go against our rights. The Judiciary Committee held a markup hearing on Wednesday for H.R. 1808, the Assault Weapons Ban Act of 2021. The legislation would ban AR-15 rifles and other so-called assault weapons. Again, assault weapons in air quotes, because they don't want to tell you what that means. I still don't know what an assault weapon means. Are you be specific in what weapons you want to ban. Just don't blanket statement and go, assault weapons, because we're going to take that as like, that's everything. That's freaking everything. A pistol's an assault weapon, a handgun, whatever you want to call it, a long rifle, short rifle. Look, assault weapon is everything. And it makes me uneasy that this type of stuff's coming out by elected officials in the United States government that's supposed to uphold the Constitution. That's not doing so. As well as high capacity magazines. I don't get this high capacity magazine thing. You literally had Sonny Houston of the View the other day literally talk about how the guy in the Indiana Mall shooting was lucky that he actually hit a moving target. And I agreed with her that it partially does possibly take luck to hit a moving target because it's extremely hard, especially when you got an active shooter on scene with you. You're being shot at. You have adrenaline going. Yes, it's extremely hard. And so rather than giving you more ammo to make sure that you can land your target or hit your target, land your shot, is they want to remove that. So instead of a 10 capacity magazine, they want to give you a 5 capacity magazine. Instead of maybe a, 10, 20, 30 plus round magazine, maybe get a barrel or something. They want to give you, 2 shots or something. I'm making that up. It's probably going to be 5 round magazines or something. But, then when you still have mass shooters still committing things, right? Because they're getting illegal magazines themselves. They're doing whatever it is. Then it's like no longer is a 5 magazine, 5 round magazine. It's now one round or whatever stupid BS they want to push. Altogether, what it's really about is just removing guns off the market altogether. So the criminals have them and then you and your family are screwed. It comes after a spate of high-profile mass shootings in recent weeks, including a supermarket in Buffalo, New York, an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas, and a 4th of July parade in Highland Park, Illinois. Prompted by these shootings, Congress passed bipartisan legislation that incentivizes states to enact red flag laws, which, again, we've gone over, doesn't exactly work all the time, to take away guns from dangerous people, strengthens background checks for gun buyers under the age of 21, and funds mental health resources. But President Joe Biden and other Democrats believe these measures did not go far enough, and have pushed to renew the 1994 federal assault weapons ban that expired in 2004. So let's get to the clip here. Let's just do it. Let's see Jerry Nadler acting like a knucklehead here and saying the quiet part out loud for all of us to hear, because I want you guys to hear how the Democrat Party is going after your guns actively right now. Like right now.
Gentleman from North Carolina, seek recognition.
To speak on the amendment.
Gentleman is recognized.
I would like to yield to anyone on the other side who would dispute that this bill bans weapons that are in common use in the United States today. Would anyone on the other side dispute that this bill would ban weapons that are in common use in the United States today?
Would the gentleman yield?
I would, for an answer to that question.
Yeah, that's the point of the bill.
There you go.
So so to clarify, Mr. Chairman, you're saying it is the point of the bill to ban weapons that are in common use in the United States today?
Yes, the problem is
If the gentleman will yield.
The guy literally, Mr. Bishop, literally had to restate his claim because he couldn't believe that. He was like, he just answered it so like bluntly. Yeah, we want to take them away. Yeah, it's common use. Yeah, whatever guns are common use. Yeah, we're going to take them out of your hands. And for those that are listening, they had a bunch of posters that said, will not infringe, but yet they're trying to infringe on your Second Amendment right. And there is a little bit of precedence here in terms of wanting to try to take away your guns, because if you recall, the District of Columbia v. Heller, the Supreme Court established a common use test. And so that's why they're using that term common use. And this was to determine whether particular firearms are protected under the Second Amendment. The question the court uses to evaluate weapons bans is whether the target firearm are in, quote, common use for lawful purposes like self-defense. And you have gun right advocates arguing that since the AR-15 rifles are commonly owned by lawful gun owners, laws that would ban them fail the Supreme Court's test. Bishop made the argument during Wednesday's Wednesday's Judiciary hearing. I wonder whether the chairman knows, I think the chairman does know, that there are more than 20 million AR-15s in the United States. That is common use. And in fact, the chairman, of course, know that because the chairman readily conceded, in fact, that the chairman said it is the purpose of the majority's bill to ban weapons that are in common use in the United States, going against what the Supreme Court put in place. And I think they're getting like a little bit of hope glimmer in terms of what the Democrat Party wants, because they're looking at the overturning of Roe v. Wade as an opportunity to have an overturning of Heller case, basically, District of Columbia v. Heller. So they're looking maybe at this as a glimmer of hope. I think it's nuts. I think it's wild, and they're going to continue to push this type of agenda. Look where they're at in terms of poll ratings. I mean, they're about to be shellacked in November, and rather than coming more middle, rather than kind of meeting Republicans more middle, they're going further left. I mean, they used to be pro guns. They used to like guns, and now they're just completely against it. I mean, they're like this with the First Amendment in terms of free speech. They want to sit there and censor conservatives, censor Republicans, and now they want to take away your guns. And people go, "Oh, you're crazy. You're a conspiracy theorist. They don't want you to take away your guns." He literally just said he wants to take your guns. It talks about the word infringement, folks. Infringement. And then now they're infringing upon your right to carry the weapon that you want, that you choose, especially the ones that are in common use. It is so frustrating that these people are getting elected by other Americans. That shows you how far we are as a country and how ripped and torn our social fabric is when we can't even agree on the Bill of Rights anymore. That shows you how far apart we are in this country. You go after the guns, there's a good likelihood, man, that you're going to start a civil war in this country. You go for the guns, it's over. It's over. And the logo at the bottom of the screen, right? The logo right here. There's a reason why the head is turned towards the microphone. I designed this myself, and I specifically designed it very similar to the bald eagle for the American rug that's in the Oval Office. At one hand, he's looking at the olive branch. The other hand, he's looking at the arrows, right? Where if he's looking at the arrows, that means we're in a time of war. If he's looking at the olive branch, we're in a time of peace. Very similar to here, this is what this logo is designed to do. Right now, the First Amendment, we're being utilized. The Second Amendment is right there next to it. And so when that head switches, that means the Second Amendment's in place to protect the First Amendment. It's always like that, where you need your weapons to go ahead and protect the rights that were given to you by God himself, God-given natural rights. But I'm telling you, folks, the design of this is for a reason. The second protects the first can protect the second. And when you can't utilize the first anymore, you got to go and utilize the second there. So there you have it. Democrats still pushing really hard to ultimately have your guns taken away. Now, it's not just trying to take away your guns and your rights, but Democrats are also forcing truckers here to ultimately lose their jobs. And this isn't getting enough news, which is why I want to cover it here on the Bald Brad Show. And maybe it's not getting enough news because it might just be a California thing. But what I've always said is that some leftist states, Democrat-ran states, which there's other Republicans that live in those Democrat-ran states, is when you see certain things in California that are happening, that can also roll over into Washington, Portland, Oregon, or the state of Oregon. That could roll into New York and other avenues. So that's why you should look at California as a possibility of being enacted within your state as well. So this is taking place in Oakland. There was a protest taking place by these truck drivers that choked traffic in a seaport on Monday, protesting a state law that makes it harder for independent contractors to transport goods and could limit labor at the state's already clogged seaports, threatening to worsen the nation's pandemic-fueled supply chain jams. Basically, there's no reason to do this right now. If you want to have this fight, have it later on. If you were to do it, I don't agree with it, but if you were to do it, have the fight when we figure out the supply chain issue. Stop shooting yourself in the foot, Democrats. Let this go. You need to let it go, let things figure out, and then have that fight later on. You need to choose your battles on when to have them. Not right now, but they don't understand that. Again, they're fueled by this emotion and this pent-up buildup to have power over people. California ports handle about 40% of container goods that enter the United States. Trucking disruptions come at a time when unions and West Coast port employers are also negotiating a high-stakes labor contract. The law known as AB5, or the gig worker law, sets tougher standards for classifying workers as independent contractors. You also see this with Lyft, Grubhub, Uber, and things like this that are going to affect them as well as being independent contractors. So independent truckers who now operate under the authority and insurance of companies that hire them for jobs would be shouldered with the hefty costs and red tape of taking that on when the law is enacted. Quote, "They want to eliminate us," said an independent driver who joined dozens of protesters on Monday at Oakland Seaport in San Francisco Bay Area. Wayne Fang, wearing a No on AB5 t-shirt, told Reuters the law would also be financially draining, that drivers aren't making anything. So why do it in the first place is basically what he's saying, and you're just going to hurt things at the end of the day. Legal challenges kept the law from going into effect in 2020. So again, this has been going on for a couple years. I first heard it with the Uber and Lyft, I believe it was. But the Supreme Court last month denied a California Trucking Association petition claiming the law is blocked by federal regulations. Experts say an injunction that put the law on hold could soon be lifted. More than 100 drivers and small trucking company operators opposed the law, swarmed 2 terminal gates in the Port of Oakland, slowing truck entry to a trickle. The action came as port truckers in Los Angeles picketed gates and snarled roadways at the nation's busiest seaport complex last week. And I actually saw footage of that, them just stopping on the freeways and completely just gridlocking everything. There's a lot of powers these truckers have, and right now they're screwing with the wrong end of the business right now. You mess with the bull, you're about to get the horns. You shouldn't be screwing with this, and for some reason, they just have to do this. And I'm talking about the truckers. I'm talking about the politicians. Why do you got to... I'm trying to keep it PG here and not cuss, but why do you got to screw around? I don't understand what's the benefit of this right now when we're trying to figure out the supply chain issue and you're pulling this stunt. You have business owners also kind of up in arms about it and said that AB5 would devastate his port trucking firm, which relies on 10 independent drivers to move everything from medical equipment to almonds. And you might be thinking, well, why can't everybody just be unionized? First of all, not everybody wants to be unionized. Even me as a teacher, I didn't want to be in the union. And sometimes it's more expensive. Sometimes you're getting outcompeted by other people, right? So, and some firms can't afford to pay a unionized worker because it's so expensive, where maybe they can compete themselves with different truckers that are, subcontracted or leased out, that they can then pay them rather than paying these union workers. So there's a lot of benefit for these firms to utilize them, and they're saving money, but soon enough, they might be saying, well, hell, I'm screwed. I might have to go out of business here because of what politicians are doing, but they don't care. It's all an agenda here. They're trying to appease the unions. That's what these politicians are in place for. They're always trying to appease somebody, which goes back, again, through all the stories we went over. Where's the money going? Whose pocket is it going into? It's not going into Americans' pockets. Tell you that much. It's not going into fixing anything. It's only going to go into hurting things. And right now, what they're doing with this is they're trying to hurt things. They're trying to make things worse. There's an estimated 70,000 truckers who own and drive their own trucks under this law. These ports need these trucks. I mean, I know I was just down there because I went on a cruise this summer, and I saw just how many containers there are and the backlog that is taking place is just mind-blowing. And again, I mean, Long Beach, the San Pedro port are some of the biggest ports in all of North America. And it is astonishing just how much stuff is going on and taking place there. And they want to screw around with this. And this is the third day truckers have protested the California's gig labor law. And it also comes from the platforms, here you go, Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash. A 2-year legal stay was recently lifted by the Supreme Court. So rather than just fixing it, solving it, they want to continue to just push it right into the ground. And this is going to affect 2,100 trucks that go through the terminal each freaking day. So wanted to keep you up to date on all of that. This is going to have, massive problems with all of you because like we just read, 40% of this comes through that port. And you also have the Port of LA that is currently at 90%. 90%. So again, just picking the wrong time to fight with people and just doing idiotic things. But why should we expect any sort of a Democrat politician right now to not do anything idiotic other than maybe Joe Manchin? Seems like he's the one that has his head out of the sand. Everybody else is just, I don't know what the hell they're doing. It just always mind boggles me that there's people that are willing to vote these people in office. Like, who are the Americans that just go, oh, this is a great idea? I don't know. Well, there you have it, folks. That is Thursday's show. As always, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, hit the plus and leave us a comment down below, and leave us a lovely 5-star review if you're watching on any of the podcast airwaves. Your help and support would be greatly appreciated. And I'll see you later here on The Bob Brat Show.